Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we still have a few people, but I think everybody has access to join. So again, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Huge thank you to CADA for being a part of this outreach. Today is designed to really have some clarification, some dialogue, get questions answered so that we can do what we need to do in Legislative Council here in a few weeks and making the best choices for our membership. So huge thank you for all of you participating. If you are set to speak today, you should have received a separate email as a panelist and being able to talk to your amendments or proposals that were sent. Bethany Brookins and I will oversee the chat and be able to just kind of answer that. If you have any specific questions or would like to speak to something, raise your hand and Brad will work with you through that process. So just getting started right off the bat, we're going to move into just some updates from CHSAA. And the CHSAA staff is going to share some thoughts, and we'll start with Rashawn with Music Month.
Morning, everyone. It is Music Month, and festivals are happening all around the state, and so we hope that that you can get out and check them out. The schedule is posted, and I'll drop it if I can for you. But we had a great opportunity yesterday to be at Mountain Vista for orchestra. Bethany was at Stanley Lake. Adam is in Rifle. And so music is going very well. So not only is there an opportunity this year to get out and see what's going on with music, we're looking forward to hopefully having you host something next year. So look forward to some more information on that. But it is Music Month, and we're definitely excited.
Okay, great. So just a reminder, along with the celebration of the 50th year anniversary for Title IX, we have been having different outreaches throughout this entire school year. Probably our most important and most exciting will be a Zoom next Wednesday, April 13th at 9 a.m. We're going to be learning from the Title IX expert herself. Peg from the NIAAA will be on to give us a brief overview of Title IX. And then it's going to be open to a Q&A. So many times you guys have reached out to me with questions on, we want to add this sport. Can we? What does that look like? That question, as well as any other common questions that you may have, or maybe random questions that you may have, this is your opportunity to ask her in person. So please join us next Wednesday. Get the word out to your Title IX coordinator in your school or school district. We'd love to have as many people on that call as possible. And then esports, Rashawn?
We are looking forward to our esports championship. This is the final semester of the pilot, and looking forward to being online in the fall. But we will be we'll be hosting, I should say, 16 teams at local host in Lakewood for our Super Smash Brothers Championship on April 28th. And so we're definitely looking forward to that, as well as what's to come. And of course, you'll hear more in our esports report on where we are with the growth of esports overall.
Thanks so much, Rashawn. And just piggybacking on some awesome things happening, CADA and CHSAA started some new AD Connects, monthly Connects. So obviously we meet 2 times a year outside of the All School Summit in November and February, but we found a way to kind of gather everybody first of the month on a Wednesday, first Wednesday of every month, and just really talk about things that are really relevant at that time. And again, huge shout out to CADA for all their work on this, as they kind of bring the content and bring the real life scenarios, and then willing to share all of their documents and things that have already been created. And so what we're finding is it's not just kind of a place for new ADs, but even other veteran ADs that might be struggling in certain areas or want to kind of upgrade some of their content and those types of things around coaches' letters and coaches' meetings, etc. So I just wanted to shout out, we have our last one May 4th. And then we'll get a survey out to the membership, just giving us feedback on our new AD kind of process. And then if you've been there around for a veteran AD, maybe some things that we can do to support you. So look for that survey to come towards the end of May.
Awesome. So just a reminder that your participation numbers are due by May 2nd. And really all that means is that in the Our School platform, your activity and athletic participants need to be placed onto appropriate rosters. There's nothing for you to submit or turn into our office. Simply on May 2nd, we'll be running the report, we'll be gathering that data and then turning it into the National Federation of High School Sports. So again, the only thing that you need to do is ensure that your rosters are up to date and correct for all of your sports and all of your activity participants, and that is due on May 2nd.
We're looking forward to sending one more email today on our Advisor University for student leadership. We've got April 10th and 11th, so Sunday and Monday, advisor training. We encourage you, if your advisors have not signed up, to get them signed up. The link is on the website. It's going to be a great 2 days. And if we're looking at what we've got, most of our advisors are in the 1 to 5 year range of being an advisor. And so definitely some back to basics as we grow our student leadership advisors. We'll also be talking about summer leadership for students. There is a summer student leadership conference that's July 8th through the 10th in the Denver metro area. And so more information will be coming out on that as early as Monday. So look forward to that.
All right, this is just a save the date for the upcoming All School Summit, which will be held Monday and Tuesday, August 1st and 2nd this fall. More details will be forthcoming, but we are really excited working with Jen and Rashawn to be inclusive and really to have a great event. Please note that all athletic directors, all activity directors, as well as there's going to be a sports medicine component. So all trainers are going to be invited, as well as an opportunity for additional trainings with Our School, Arbiter, and Max Preps for those athletic and activity assistants. So a great opportunity and a great resource for a lot of individuals across the state. So please just put that save the date, August 1st and 2nd down. And again, more information will be forthcoming when we finalize the venue and all of the details.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bethany. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Matt Heckel, president of CADA, to kind of go over some updates from their end and talk to you a little bit about their upcoming conference that's at the end of this month.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you for everyone's support, and for those who attended our new ADs and those that aren't new ADs joining on too. Hopefully you felt that it's been beneficial. If there's any time that you need information from CADA, any of our board members, please don't hesitate to ever reach out. Right now, we have the conference going on, so please sign up. Registration is still open. We've extended the deadline for early registration, so take advantage of that. We have some amazing speakers, opportunities, breakouts. We are again offering LTI classes, so if you have any interest in taking some of the legal classes or anything like that, please sign up for that. This year, as in the years past, we've had the Mike and Mike show, which has been amazing. This year we're doing something a little different. We're doing the Mike and Mike karaoke night down at Base 9. So please join us for that. We're taking nominations still. If you would like to be part of our CADA group, we need you. We are looking for people that want to be movers and shakers in the athletic world to join us. The nomination closed later this week, if I recall correctly, but we want to find people to join and be part of us. It doesn't matter where, we try to help you out and make it so we try to move the area. If we try to go south, we try to go north, make it easy for commutes and different things like that. So please join us, sign up, and fill out the nomination form. Any questions for anything that I discussed, please email me, and love to have you and see you in a couple of weeks up in Breckenridge.
And Matt, I think we have a video we're going to share with the membership on one of your keynote speakers.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Colorado ADs. My name is Jeff Jansen. I'm super excited to come out to Colorado this spring for your ADs conference. I've had the privilege of over the last 25 years working with 30 national championship teams. And what I'm going to do is talk about what makes their culture so special and help you with your teams hopefully develop that same championship culture. I'll also be talking about how do you develop the kind of leaders that are going to make a difference in your athletic department as well. So definitely join us this spring in Breckenridge for your upcoming ADs conference, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Those that haven't seen Jeff, he's amazing. He has some fantastic materials. I use it all the time for my captain's leadership. So he's one of our keynote speakers. We have many of them. So thanks, Jen.
Yeah, you got it. So just a couple things that came in for a couple more CHSAA updates real quick. It's just the deadline for registration for LC is this Friday along with the Hall of Fame. So any of those accommodations that you may need, please reach out to Kathy as soon as you can and get that squared away. And then also anytime you have just a spare minute, we always want to push the awards and scholarships that we do for our student athletes and recognizing some of our amazing, even adults and student athletes within our building. So I know you see those emails come through from Lane every Monday. He's got it very easy for you just to hit the link, fill that out real quick. But we really would love to have a lot more involvement. And I am going to do a shout out to Widefield, who is consistently sending those in. We truly appreciate you and thank you for recognizing those in your community. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, utilize the chat if you need to, raise your hand. We will kind of go through that if we need to. If you need to speak onto something and you're not getting it, feel free to reach out to one of us and we'll make sure, but we'll be watching that. And we're going to start off right off with Con 1, Rhonda Blanford Green.
Oh my God. Right when I unmuted it, took my picture away.
Hold on one second here.
Hi, Jen. I had to
Hi,
come into
Rhonda.
Rashawn's office, but I'm going to turn this over to Ernie. We absolutely heard the membership on the 2 legislative council meetings and wanted to make sure that if we were looking at 2 meetings, what is the relevancy of 2 meetings? Over the course of 5 years, we've had less amendments, we've had less edits because of the outreach prior to an April legislative council meeting. But we also know that there are some things that occur between the beginning of the school year until we get to April. And so the handbook committee, as well as the board of directors, look through what having a second meeting would be in January without getting or deleting the roundtable, which has been a tremendous outreach and educational opportunity on proposals that would come. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernie and run back to my office. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. So the board of directors, when we were looking at legislative council and some of the things that we saw as far as clock proposals and some of the other things that were coming up, we realized that with some of the clock proposals that were coming up, that it didn't give us enough time to actually make decisions that were in the best interest of the association and some schools who were appealing without the second legislative council every other year. So this proposal is just to give us a second legislative council meeting in January of even years. And that would allow us to vote on the clock committee report that would happen on odd years in November. So we just felt like at least every other year we needed to have a second legislative council meeting in order to be able to conduct association business that affects schools and leagues with some fidelity. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks
If
so
not,
much.
I guess that's it.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you. So going to Con 2, which is also 2 meetings at Legislative Council, coming from the Jeffco League and Mile High, and I think Mike Hughes may be speaking to this one.
I've got that, Jen.
Oh, Patrick, thanks.
So along the same lines as what Ernie had just presented about having a second meeting on even years, our league in conjunction with the Mile High League, we just value the second legislative council meeting, a time to get together, a time to have conversation, a time to really go through these things. We also, it is our belief, that being an athletic director is hard, and being in a building is hard, and there's so many things, and having the ability to really comb through the LC packet isn't something that's always possible. And we just believe there's going to be some things that slip through the cracks from time to time, and having that second LC would give us the ability to address those things. So our league, in conjunction with the 2A Mile High, is very much in favor of going back to the 2 legislative council meetings as we've done prior. Any questions for us?
No, I am going to interject, and I'm going to give myself a disclaimer right now.
You guys hear me?
I am going to ask questions on some of the
Can you guys hear me on
rationale.
CHSAA?
We said we can hear you. There's a lot of background noise, and I think Rhonda's speaking right now, but we'll grab you right after.
Sorry.
Okay, so just, again, I'm giving myself a quick disclaimer on some of the questions I'll probably ask on some of the proposals. And when I look at the rationale on this one, and I think you have to look at the historical 5 years of, I agree with you, Patrick, the coming together, the opportunity to have those conversations around the packets and the proposals. And by January, we're only looking at a third of the packet anyway. But those points of emphasis that you're talking about have been accomplished through the roundtable. And in fact, it's in a more informal way where people feel the opportunity to ask those questions prior to a vote. And I just feel like we've in the past 5 years opened the opportunity for more CADA outreaches, statewide outreaches, communication, and the roundtable has taken the place of the LC. It's allowed us to find those mistakes, allowed us to edit bylaw proposals that were confusing to the membership. And I felt, and I think the membership did, because obviously we voted and approved 1 meeting a year, that it has allowed us to be more prepared and better to forward proposals for the next year of implementation, not to change them after the fact on a 50% inequitable way that you only get a third of your packet, but then the April proposals don't have that same opportunity to have that kind of discussion. So I just wanted to put those out there because I don't see where there has been any negatives around not having a legislative council meeting, but really embracing a roundtable discussion that allows us to be better prepared in April, which has caused less amendments, less edits, and really everybody moving forward understanding what we're voting on in April. So I just wanted to leave it at that, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda. Any other comments or questions to that before moving on?
Yeah, I wanted to say that the Centennial League would also support Con 2. I know that when we've met with presidents of the different leagues across the state, that at the time it was near unanimous that everybody was kind of in support of Con 2. So I just wanted to share that.
Agreed. Con 2 is here. Number one, I agree, Rhonda, that theoretically the idea of a 1 meeting system can work in theory. I just don't think that the practice has matched the theory of this. I think the idea of us getting together as a state, and I know that COVID has impacted our ability to get together. I understand that, and the ability to discuss things in an open format has been hampered some over the last 2 years. But I really believe that the 2 meeting system for us is a very productive way for us to have meetings, to have our packets in a smaller, more condensed fashion, that there is good discussion, there is open dialogue, and there is the ability, as much as we don't want to make mistakes, there is the ability to correct things and to table some situations that there's just not enough information on. So I hope that the membership will support our proposal. We feel like this is a very solid and thoughtful proposal for the entire state. Thank you.
One more thing to add, if I can, Jen, is I think we are not in favor of, or none of the league president conversations I've been involved in have had anything to say about doing away with outreaches. I think the membership is really likes what CADA is doing with the outreaches. This would just be an in addition to.
Well, and I think we might just have that just a little confused. So right now, we always do these outreaches. This outreach, we've came together as a statewide as we started with COVID. I think what the discussion is around the roundtable, which happens in January. So that's separate than this. So I think that's probably what you meant. But okay, anything else there to share from the proposal end? Great. We are now going to turn it over to Trent Kerr and Randy Wilson from Wiggins, and they are going to speak on the next 3, but we'll just break them down. So Con 3, Legislative Council member. I'm not sure if that's Randy or if that's Trent.
Good morning. My name is Chris Selly. I'm actually sitting in for Trent Kerr. Trent had a conflict that he contacted me about. I'm the superintendent in the Meeker School District, and I don't know the specifics of this particular amendment, but I can speak to the request that has been submitted for the Rural Alliance to have similar levels of input as CASE and CASB. I'm also a member of the board of directors for the Rural Alliance. So I think there's a couple of different proposals that would impact. So if it's okay, I can just maybe offer up some insight on all of those, and then happy to answer any questions.
Sure.
I think the basis of the request is that the Rural Alliance represents the vast majority of all rural and small rural school districts in the state, much like CASE represents school executives and CASB represents school boards, and oftentimes are considered peers with those 2 organizations. In addition to that, roughly 85% of the school districts in the state of Colorado are small or small rural. And so if you look at CHSAA membership on a basis of rural school districts, a significant majority of the membership from a school district standpoint are rural and small rural. I understand that's not the case necessarily if you look at member schools, but from a school district standpoint. And so the request is just to ensure that there is a guaranteed method by which rural school districts can have a voice. I know right now there is plenty of rural voice through the current structures, but I don't believe any of those are specifically guaranteed for rural school districts. So they can be filled by any number of representatives, and it may or may not be rural district. And so because of the large membership percentage from a school district standpoint, and in addition to that, because of how activities impact rural schools, I think it's important to point out that there is some differences there. You all are aware of that, but I think of our school district. In our high school, depending on the season or the year, roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of our students are involved in some sort of CHSAA sponsored extracurricular activity. So there's a huge impact on how our schools and our communities operate. So you combine those 2 items, how extracurriculars impact our communities and our schools, along with a significant percentage of districts in the CHSAA that are rural or small rural. The idea would be similar representation on legislative council, similar representation on the board of directors, an advisory position for the Rural Alliance, similar to what CASE and CASB have right now. So that's kind of a broad sweeping comments. I'm happy to try to answer any questions if you have any.
Just to break it down, Con 3 is having a legislative council member. Con 4 would be a board of directors position, and Con 5 is the advisory member, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
And I failed to mention too, the Western Slope League is not listed on there, but speaking to our athletic director, I believe they are in support of that. And I didn't see if Luke DeWolf was on, but he could correct me if I'm incorrect on that.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments or questions for some clarification? Okay, thank you so much, Chris.
I have,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Jason, go
two
ahead.
computers going at once. I had a couple questions for you, Chris. Jason Wilkins out of Cherry Creek School District Centennial League. You brought up a couple things I wanted to ask about. One would be, you talked about the Rural Alliance and the number of districts that represents. I guess I would ask how you view that versus maybe 4A or 5A schools that have larger numbers of students, and how you kind of view that in comparison. Obviously, we're a kid first industry. And so those other districts maybe are kids, schools that are not in the Rural Alliance. Why would they not be afforded the same things that you're discussing?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think you got to look at it through maybe a similar lens to how our federal government set up. Not that the federal government's a good example for how we should operate. Let's be clear about that. But there's representation based on numbers, and there's representation based on states, right? If your state population's higher, there's a way for that representation to occur. If you're a state, you get a specific number of seats at the table, so to speak. I don't think there's any less representation. I think those opportunities for all types of schools in the state are offered through the CHSAA structures. I think this is really just a request to make sure for the future that there is a rural voice, because there is a high percentage of school districts, higher percentage of school districts, even though there's smaller numbers. I agree with you on that. Representing, there's more organizations represented, and there is greater impact within those organizations on the kids by what happens with CHSAA. I don't know if that really answers your question clearly, but that's how I would respond.
And I think we do have Luke DeWolf on
Am I
here.
able to recognize someone else to ask a question? Are we able to do that?
They can raise their hand. Yep. Who is it?
His name's Larry Bull.
Sure. We'll have to have him raise his hand and we'll get him in. At this point,
He's-
is he right there?
He's sitting right next to me, so I can move my computer over if you want.
Okay. Okay. There is a lot of feedback, so somebody's going to have to mute.
So just a few thoughts or comments. When I see proposals like this, I try to see what the intent of the proposal is, and don't want to make assumptions, but what it appears is that there's voices from the Rural Alliance or the smaller schools that are not being heard or represented with this. And I guess the question that I would want to raise is that the CADA is an organization that's supposed to get feedback from all schools. The board of directors are supposed to get feedback. So are we looking at changing the board of directors or this whole process? The other concern that I have is this appears to be special interest. How many other special interest groups are we looking at? So I think that's a piece to where I know there's a group that 5A Metro superintendents at times do not feel their voice is heard within this, and things that would benefit our group don't get voted on, so on. And I guess the other part is when we look at this, the Legislative Council does support and make sure things are competitive equity and those things. A great example is when we the smaller schools were having issues having a number of kids to participate at basketball, a proposal came through, which was definitely supported for the smaller schools to provide those opportunities. So I guess I'm just wondering, are we looking at changing things within the board of directors or more special interest? And how do we determine, there may be more rural schools, but then student participation, Jason brought out that. I would also want to talk about the financial piece that comes into play with this. So those are just a few comments. And Chris, I don't know if you can answer those, but I think we're possibly heading down a slippery slope if we're going to get more special interest groups in there with that. And it also has the feel, and again, I think we need to be very, very careful with this. Are we looking at doing things different from 1A to 3A to 4A, 5A that meets the needs of those classifications? So just a few comments. And Chris, I don't know if you can respond to that or what other individuals' thoughts are on this, but I think we need to really find out what the intent of this is, and is it good for the state association to where we're not going to create all these special interest groups with this, because I think the structure is there. If we need to relook at the structure, I think that would be a positive thing. So that's all I got. Thanks, Jason.
I think it's fair to ask the question about special interest groups. I think, there's already special interest groups represented. I would consider CASE and CASB to be special interest groups. They represent school boards, they represent school executives. I think the distinction or the delineation would be that those are statewide organizations, much like the Rural Alliance is. The Rural Alliance represents rural districts across the state, just like CASB represents school boards across the state. They're not limited to one geographic region, although it is, limited to student population. So I think that's a fair question that needs to be addressed. Is there a distinction or a delineation if special interest groups are added to board directors, legislative council, advisory roles, whatever it may be? Where do you draw the line on that? I would argue that the Rural Alliance is more aligned with the special interest groups that are currently represented than any other special interest group that might be interested. Hopefully that answers the question around special interest groups. I think the motivation is exactly what I said earlier. There absolutely are structures right now in place for the rural voice, rural concerns to be heard, to be expressed, but there's nothing that guarantees that that's going to happen. And that's why this request is in front of you all right now, is to ensure that that's preserved as CHSAA evolves in the future.
And I would just add, thank you, Chris and Larry, that there is a guarantee based on the league structure and adding another league last year, that several of those leagues will only have rural school representation. I think what Larry was alluding to is there has not been a 5A representative on the board for 3 years. But because of the way our league structure is in place, there will always be rural representation on the CHSAA board of directors. Whether or not that's an athletic director, a principal, or a superintendent, multiple seats are reserved based on the league structure on the board of directors for rural voice.
Thank you. And I think Luke DeWolf wanted to speak. Luke, are you available now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and I would just, to the point that I think Rhonda and Larry both made, I just wanted to clarify a little bit, especially on Con 4 when it comes to the makeup of the board of directors. I mean, currently there's 17 voting members on the board of directors. 5 of those are from rural schools and members of the Rural Alliance. So the voice is definitely there. Now, how that's being communicated or what kind of feedback and those schools maybe not being heard, that's another issue. But in terms of representation, I would say if we're looking at geographical areas, those small rural schools have a much bigger membership on the board, 5 of the 17, than any other group. And specifically, if we're looking at urban versus rural. I believe there's only one maybe from a real urban big school district member of the board of directors. So, and as Rhonda alluded to, based on the districts, there is a guarantee on the board of directors that that at least I believe two of those positions, two of the districts will always be a rural school. And then CASB and CASE have the option to elect whoever they want. And right now we have two superintendents from small rural school districts who are on the board of directors. We have two ADs who are from small rural schools. And then the president of the board of directors, myself, is from a rural alliance school. I just want to clarify that and make sure that that's out there. And then Paul Kane put in the chat, I'm not the president of Western Slope League. Greg Hawkins is the president. And he just said the Western Slope League, in talking about if they're in favor of these proposals or not, Greg said he didn't indicate support on these proposals from the Western Slope League. We're meeting next week, our league is, to discuss these further, but I don't know if that's been determined yet, whether the Western Slope League is in favor or not in favor of these. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Mike Hughes?
Jen, yeah, so, excuse me. I mean, coming from small schools, was on the Western Slope for almost 20 years. I understand maybe some of the the thinking that goes along with this. The idea that we're going to split up our state into alliances to try and promote certain factions of our state as far as their size is concerning. I don't think that's where our state membership needs to go. We need to work together collectively for the betterment of all of our schools in our state, not in a segment, in a fraction of a group to try and work for the special interest of that group. You can say that CADA is a special interest group that's represented on our board of directors. That's fine. We are made up of our Athletic Directors Association as a whole. It is every member of our state association in one. I don't see, I guess there's other parts of this I don't really like. I don't like what's the cutoff. Are 3A schools then in the rural section of the state just not a part of this because they're 3A, not 1A, 2A? They're too big to be a big school or a little school, but too small to be a big school. I mean, there's just so many parts of this that isolate small schools and try and make them kind of a separatist movement. We need to come together. We need to work together collectively. If there's things that we're not understanding about the needs of smaller schools, then that's the job of those leagues to come to our membership, make the case for those pertinent issues that are really important to you, and get our body to understand. I really don't believe that anybody in Douglas County, Cherry Creek, Jeffco, any of the larger districts are opposed to helping promote anything that's going to help our smaller schools. As Larry pointed out earlier, we're all in to help our smaller schools get what they need to function and survive in the way that they need to do to prosper. We're here to help that happen. We just need to understand better. We don't need a separate alliance on the board to kind of promote one self-interest group to kind of make sure that things happen. There's ways already in place for that. So enough for me. I just hope that you guys understand where we're coming from, why I promote it, to just be a part of all of us, and that this would kind of be defeated. Thanks.
Rhonda, did you have something?
I was just going to say, Mike, thank you for saying that, because as a membership, you have heard, and things like RPI, where our rural schools and our outerlying schools were being deficient and given 50% of their numbers because they crossed the state line. This membership passed a bylaw for our small schools that weren't able to field full varsity teams for practices to be competitive ready. The membership has responded to that and allowed 8th graders to play. And then even in the last year, we have opened it up to principals and superintendents to be a part of nominating themselves for our committees, right? And actually being voting members. So I don't want it to seem as if the membership has not heard, because you have passed in the last 5 years multiple bylaws that have supported the concerns and the challenges that maybe the perception is they're just in the metro area. So I do want to give kudos to this membership because you are listening and you have responded. We all know that this is based on some things that happened in the pandemic. And I think separating me from those kinds of things, I'm going to go with Mike, that I think that there's a healing that will happen and new leadership will help to have that bigger voice where people feel heard. So I'll leave it at that. You guys have done a great job in the last 5 years to respond to the challenges in our membership.
Just a quick clarification, if I may. To respond to the question about where the cutoff is, the Rural Alliance represents school districts that are classified as rural or small rural based on the Colorado Department of Education definition. That doesn't necessarily align with CHSAA classifications. It has to do with total student population in the school district as well as proximity to an urban region. So it wouldn't necessarily preclude. I mean, there's some districts that are considered rural and they're 4A. Just depending on the size of their high school, right? So it doesn't align particularly well with the current classification system in CHSAA. And I do think it's appropriate to point out that I feel, this is me speaking, I'm not representing anybody when I say this, I do feel like the CHSAA has been responsive to questions and concerns from rural districts raised over the last couple of years. Again, this is really just around trying to make sure that that structure stays in place.
Great, thank you. Greg Hawkins is the president, obviously, of the WSL, and he is saying they are meeting Tuesday. We do not have a vote in favor from the league at this point. So just so everybody kind of got that. So again, thank you very much for the conversation and dialogue from all parties. We appreciate you coming on, Chris, and stepping in for those others. So thanks so much for that. Moving on to Con 6, which is the CHSAA committee members, and I believe Rhonda is going to speak to this.
Sorry, I'm multitasking. All right, I think we're on CHSAA, Jen. Just shake your head. I can see.
Correct. Con
Okay.
6. Yep.
So again, about just elevating credibility around Colorado groups that I always call it the triplicate, which I feel is CADA, which is CHSAA, which is CHSAA. And CHSAA has been appointing representatives on the sports that they sanction on our sports committees, but we haven't given them that opportunity to vote on proposals and ideas that they bring from the different sports groups. So in communication with the CHSAA board, with Becky, with Joe, we felt that this was a way to help to elevate CHSAA and their representatives on our committees. It doesn't provide any additional members. They're already there. But I would like to, because I think his voice resonates much better than mine when it comes to the advocacy for coaches. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe Brown.
So Brad, you'll need to add him in to be able to speak.
Should be good.
Okay, very good. Joe, are you able to speak?
Yeah.
Perfect.
1 second. Sorry about that. We're in a large group meeting here in the north, so we were getting some feedback from that. Rhonda, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that. Right now, currently, we have CHSAA members that are on the boards of most of the sport committees, where they're able to give input on what our board believes and thinks towards coaches' education and also the individual sports, but currently they are not voting members of those committees. So this gives the opportunity for coaches to have a larger voice in our sport committees. without increasing the size of the individual sport committees. Currently, there is nothing written that says that CHSAA must have a representative on the board. So we feel like this gives an opportunity for coaches to have that feedback and opportunity as well. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability.
Great, thank you, Joe. Okay, not seeing any questions or comments, we'll move forward. Now jumping over to the administrative proposals, looking at admin 1, senior students enrollment in college courses. Justin.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, we talked about this quite a bit at the roundtable, so don't need to cover it too much here today, but essentially just striking out the portion there in the exception in at least 4.3 college credit approved, or sorry, in at least 4.3, and it just says in college approved courses. Again, this is simply for your seniors in their second semester, and really this is just to give more flexibility and ability for you at the local level to make some of those determinations on full-time students or not. So
thanks, Justin. Any questions or comments here? Okay, I see none in the chat. Moving over to ADM 2, coach sponsor registration, Adam.
Yeah, so just real quick, this one, a couple of minor changes that are listed here. It's going to be by the coach's first official practice. Right now that reads competitive day, so this will be the first official practice. They would need to meet all the requirements. And then secondly, we scratched varsity head coaches and just left it as all coaches shall participate annually in the rules clinic. Those are going to be online. There are certain times with, I mean, I'll be honest, in baseball, there are certain times where there's an assistant coach that has to finish the game because the varsity coach has been asked to leave by the umpire. And therefore, it makes sense for all of our coaches to know what the rules are and go through that quick training. Again, with it being available online, there's no added expense for them to travel somewhere and partake in that. They can simply click on it when they register.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions or comments regarding ADM 2? Awesome. So looking at ADM 3, fall regain dates, Justin?
Yep, again, spoke about this at the roundtable. All we're doing here is just trying to align all of the fall sports so that the regain percentages are similar. If you have noticed, maybe in this year's bylaws, you'd have some students sitting out 30%, some, I think softball was as high as like 75% of the season. So we just tried to align those weeks. The only change here from when we last spoke on this in January at the roundtable, Jen, myself, and Mike Hughes, we noticed that gymnastics was not in alignment. So that went from week 12 to week 11. So everything else is the exact same that you saw in January. Gymnastics is week 11. And that, again, that was just to make it more aligned with all the other sports in the fall.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. And thanks for Mike Hughes and that dialogue around gymnastics. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments on ADM 3? Okay, looking at ADM 4, winter and spring regain dates, Christina Miner.
Hi, good morning, everyone. With ADM 3 coming out, it really made me think, and over the last 7 years going into a winter and or spring season, when a kid comes to register and I have to tell them either the day they're registering, they're not eligible to compete for that entire season because that's the regain date, or a week into the season was really hard for me. So ADM 3, when that came through, looking at that 35%, we decided to put forward something that is similar for the winter and the spring athletes as well. Because in that winter week is right around the end of first semester, but instead of saying first semester, we put the weekend so it correlates and knowing not everybody is on semesters. And then same with the spring seasons, we looked at about that 35%-ish that the fall sports have adjusted to. And the part of the reason we put forward to this is when I ask questions about that fall, why are we adjusting fall but not winter and spring? It was shared with me, well, kids have the opportunity to do summer school. And I know at my school, besides the COVID years, summer school is very expensive and a majority of my students cannot afford summer school. And so if we're looking at giving kids opportunities that are equitable, that seemed like the right thing to do for me, to me and our league. And then also, I've had many kids that all of a sudden their sophomore, junior, or senior year have decided to do a sport and they know nothing about these regate dates and these expectations just because they haven't been part of that culture or they're new to Colorado or my school. And so this just gives kids opportunities to be committed and connected to school, you know, in a way that hopefully helps them, you know, graduate on time.
Christina, there was a question on girls golf week 29. Are we sure of that date?
I can double check it, but because that might be a typo. It's probably week 39. So if I put that in there, I can double check that. Shoot.
Yeah, because week 29 would
It
be
might be a typo.
Yeah.
So because everything else is at 38, 39, and 25. If 25 is the end of first semester, yeah, that's too early. So my guess is it's supposed to be 39. So I apologize.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions or comments, thoughts to that proposal? Okay, great. Moving on to ADM 5, transfer 50% of sports season. Kevin Benji.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing me some time to talk about some of the goals and some context around ADM 5. A student may transfer for a variety of reasons, which may include a family move, school closure, broken home, loss of housing, or a school environment that just doesn't meet the family's expectations for one reason or another. So for those students and families that are unable to produce a paper trail of legal documents or simply want to move to a different school environment, their restriction is 100% of their varsity eligibility for the upcoming season. Well, we know that Colorado is a school choice system whereby students can request to attend any public school in Colorado across district lines. And in viewing this through the lens of keeping students engaged and advocating for a level of equity regardless of economic conditions, ADM 5 is a proposal to the membership to adjust our current policy to a 50% varsity restriction so that we are creating opportunities for students to be eligible at the varsity level rather than be ineligible. A student only has 4 years of high school eligibility, and we should allow the family to make the best choice for their student and for their family. So our goal for ADM 5 is to provide a level of compromise in terms of participation for students who transfer during their high school career, but don't meet the hardship standards. Thanks for your time and your consideration. I'll take any question and I'll hope to answer as best I can.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I don't see anything in there. So we are good to go.
I will, Jen, I had the opportunity to speak with Kevin because we had a great conversation around this and the equity part of allowing a transfer to impact the postseason part of the season, especially with RPI. Since the membership did vote and approve to delete the 50%, over the course of the years, the handbook committee has put in bylaws to help support the very thing that Kevin said. If we have a rural school or a school that doesn't offer a JV program, those students are allowed to play varsity during a compartmentalized time that doesn't impact the outcome because we now have put more emphasis on RPI. And then in individual sports, Kevin and I talked about if you have a good track athlete or you have a good swimmer or a good wrestler, they don't need a full season to have one event to be able to be ranked and participate on a team in a postseason in our state championships if there are no consequences for making that transfer without meeting the other 25 plus bylaws that support a transfer, whose parents make a move, whose parents are divorced, even now whose parents are separated. There's exceptions within the current bylaws that do support the students that should be eligible for varsity. So I wanted to put out the 50% provides an inequitable transfer opportunity that impacts the outcome and the end of the season. I'm in the trenches every single day with your waivers. I can tell you, had several of our students that took the 1847 been allowed to play postseason, the outcome of basketball as well as football would have changed tremendously by the number of kids that were standing on the sideline supporting their teams, but had the opportunity to play regular season and not impact. 50% impacts the outcome and the postseason play, especially under RPI. So I just wanted to put that out there. We had a great conversation around it. I think as a membership, we continue to adjust our bylaws for those situations of our kids who don't have access, who maybe don't have all the paper trails that the bylaws currently ask for. And I think we'll continue to change those things in the future, but allowing a student to transfer for any reason, pick a team after choice, is going to effectively change the outcome of many of our sports for postseason.
Thank you, Rhonda. There is a comment that says, if I recall, we left 50% because super teams were being created to win championships. What would be the difference now? So it's a question that's in the chat.
This would go back to that same mentality that if I have a 6'5" basketball player doesn't like the school he's at or she's at and decides to transfer to a school that they know has a history of being in the playoffs, that kid's willing to sit out 50% of their season in order to participate in the last half in the postseason. So it is a bigger picture of why 50%. It's an inequitable super team type situation, but I think as a membership, you have realized that we do want kids to participate, and you've made many changes, one being 1847, but also relaxing some of our bylaws in terms of what documentation we have required in the past, and now we're allowing to at least try to getting that kid at some level of participation throughout the season. It's not always, I say this all the time, good kids sometimes have to play varsity or play JV.
Thanks, Rhonda. Kevin, anything else to add?
No, that's all.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving along with ADM 6 with transfer athletic motivated burden of proof. Rhonda.
And I don't mean to keep saying this, but there is a reason why in 5 years, we've only had 4 board appeals. We've only had 1 court case, which we won in terms of our transfer bylaws. And it's because the membership is recognizing that we just need to make sure that we're not flying by the seat of our pants. We are able to reference bylaws and be accountable and equitable across the state. And this is just another bylaw that strengthens where we were questioned on some things this year, that transfers that are motivated by athletics per the sending AD, and we're not questioning our ADs because they're in the trenches and they know why a student is transferring, but that they have the burden of proof to provide clear and convincing evidence that the transfer was not motivated by varsity considerations for athletics. So it just puts some additional wording in there that if a parent or student is saying, I'm not going to school B because this is athletics, but the sending AD is saying, absolutely, this is athletically motivated, the burden of proof is now on the parent and the student that are leaving school A.
Okay, perfect. So not seeing any questions. I'm just gonna step in for Jen real fast here. Okay, moving on. The next one, Rhonda, sports specialized training, please.
Thank you. I think we all know that we're starting to see in Colorado, it's happened across the nation, but we're seeing it more in our state with specialized training facilities, the creation of basketball academies, ice hockey academies. And we dealt with a situation this winter with wrestling. And through our legal and through our office, we found that we really didn't have a robust bylaw that separated what is a club, an elite program, what is specialized training, what does that mean? We didn't even have a checklist, and the families technically provided us with the points that you see in this bylaw so that we can make those determinations. We sat with our fingers crossed, not knowing whether or not we would have an injunction. And we really weren't sure our bylaws were, the bylaw around specialized training was going to be able to support what we all know is inequitably unfair for a student to practice 24/7 and then participate in CHSAA state championships, or to play in our seasons, transfer to Florida, play on in a specialized golf program from October until through the summer, and then show up again for boys golf. So this is just really putting some things into place. Not one is more important than the other, but it's a template to ask the right questions to try to determine if that student has participated in the last 365. And if so, was it a club program, or were they participating in specialized training and then coming back and participating in a high school state championship with more opportunities, more access than the kids that are really truly don't have those opportunities. So I'll leave it at that. It looks like it's overwhelming, but it's been vetted by our legal department, and hopefully we don't have to enact it, but at least we have something in place now that basically says if you come from another state to participate in a specialized training program, you're not going to participate against the student athletes that have those parameters that are education first and then athletics second.
Okay, great. Are there any questions, comments for Rhonda? Okay, seeing none, moving on to name, image, and likeness, please.
Sorry, Bethany, Tom had his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Brad. I didn't see. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead, Tom, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I got a question. So I'm a little bit confused. How long is the student athlete ineligible if he or she transfers over from one of these sports specialty schools?
Well, in speaking with our attorney, and you already have a precedent set for international students that transfer to our country, participate in Florida, and then show up in Colorado, that they do not regain varsity eligibility. And so that is kind of the stance that we're taking. If you're coming to Colorado to participate in an Olympic training wrestling program, and you're working with that group every single year, should that student be allowed to participate in our state wrestling championships under the provisions that they've accepted and contractually entered into with an outside group? So right now, the way this is written, your specialized training, that's what you want to be in an elite program that puts athletics before education. You do not regain eligibility, but it does say, if you see the wording in there, that if that person were, or that student athlete were to separate themselves from the specialized training, they could submit a hardship.
Yeah, so I guess that's my question. So like some of these basketball academies, we have this situation currently, so I'm not trying to personalize this, but I'm just trying to work through it in my mind. If they tried one of those sports academies, didn't like it, and then came back to the high school, technically this would mean they would be ineligible in that sport for the rest of their high school career, but they could play another sport at your high school that they didn't participate in at that sports specialty training school.
Yes, no on number one, because you could apply for a hardship, didn't work out. So maybe that next year the kid is JV and below, they play JV and below, it's their senior year, they would have the opportunity to play varsity. So you couldn't come straight from the specialized training program, follow that hardship, and then play varsity right away, right? So I don't want to say that it's like the death penalty if they sit out that 1 year of eligibility with JV. Yes, they should be able to come back, but they will always have 100%, as it says, in the sports that weren't tied to that specialized training. So if you were a basketball player, then you went to a specialized training basketball academy, but you're also a track athlete, you are not penalized for the track portion because that's not what you've done 24/7.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Brad, is there anyone else that I'm missing?
Can I ask a follow-up question, quick?
Yeah,
Sure.
Brian Baum.
Okay, let's do Mike Hughes and then Brian.
Rhonda, I just have a question quick. So let's say a student A goes to a tennis academy in California for a semester. It's an educationally based program. There's an educational component to it, but it does have a focus on tennis. That student then transfers back to your school. They would not be eligible then to participate in your high school program at all?
Okay, so I don't know of any academy that technically what we're seeing, they're all online students because the travel schedules, the practice schedules, all of those things. So that's why I said you would turn it in as a hardship so that we could check the boxes to see. I don't know of anything that's educationally based that you would leave your high school to go somewhere else to get education and then return back to your school. So I think it would have to be, I know what you're saying is a what if, but if you look at a hardship, it's not that complicated to see that if you go to the Seacrest Ice Hockey Academy in Maine and you're doing online school and then you're transferring back here, that the purpose of you going to Maine was for ice hockey specialized training. I don't see very many tennis where you just go to Georgia to play tennis and you're education based, but you're not even under the Georgia Association. You're a offshoot program, and then you come back to our school. It's really easy to connect the dots once the documentation is put into place. So there's always an opportunity to apply for a hardship. I would say we have one right now. He's on, we have a kid and we never had a bylaw in place. So I've had to let him play every single time he plays our high school tennis season. He goes to Arizona, plays with the tennis academy all year, and then shows back up at during our school year. And we've never had a bylaw that's not allowed him to play. So this kid has been playing every single year. This specialized tennis, this specialized bylaw will allow the future commissioner to be able to say and look at all of the checkpoints and say, was this an education-based transfer? Why didn't this kid move with his family? If the emphasis is on tennis, how can we not say that that kid had an additional opportunity than the kids that are enrolled and participating in CHSAA programs at a member school?
Okay, and then I think Brian Bond had a comment.
I just want to make sure that inside of this, that we're not punishing the kid for a parent choice. Ron, I hear what you're saying, and I think protecting is the right thing to do. I'm wondering if they can't participate for all 4 years, shouldn't it be a 1 year sit out just like everything else that we do? Or am I not fully understanding that?
I think that's what I clarified, that if we had a kid that went to, and I'm using real life scenarios, these aren't made up scenarios. If you had a kid that went to the Seacrest Ice Hockey Academy and they played and it didn't work out for them, parents will tell you. I mean, these parents said, we were sold a bill of goods and we're not going to pay $40,000 a year for our kid to play ice hockey in Maine. So we want to come back to Colorado. I think that if that kid has separated themselves from the academy, 1 year. They've participated in the last 365. 1 year of JV sit out is equitable and is aligned with how we do business. And then that student would regain eligibility. But if we're looking, as someone said, I think you do it as a hardship. This is a hardship transfer. You would get the JV and below ruling, no different than any other student, and the student would have full eligibility the following year.
That helps. I guess I just didn't read it in the language, but you saying it, that makes me feel a lot better. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, and at the end of the day, I think this isn't really like a back and forth. If we think that it's fair for kids to transfer into our state, enroll in an academy, participate 24/7, have core training at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then do their other things throughout the day, and then show up at a practice. And some of them don't even show up at practice. They show up at events and they wrestle, or they play ice hockey, or they play tennis against member school athletes. Then we don't have to move forward with anything. But if we really need to have some checks and balances around competitive equity, a bylaw of this nature at least gives the new commissioner and our attorney the ability to uphold the competitive equity pieces that are part of our mission. So it's really putting this together to answer a situation that is occurring. Someone just said it's happening with our basketball academies, and we know what we dealt with wrestling, and we did not feel like our bylaws gave us the ammunition we needed to fight or to advocate for competitive equity around those sports. So that's how simple it is.
Great, thanks, Rhonda. Any other discussion on ADM 7? Okay, moving over to ADM 8, name, image, and likeness. Rhonda Blanford-Green.
Yes, we're just responding to what's happening in the sports world, right? And we have 2 state associations right now in a legal battle for how they've created, one of them not creating a policy and trying to uphold their amateur status, and another, a more restrictive policy. And when the NCAA opens a door, we need to be able to respond. We do have an athlete in our state already that's moving in this direction. Our policy is very simple. We're just saying, you know what, kids would have the ability to represent themselves outside of promoting their school, CHSAA, logos. It's a very simplified policy that addresses where the NCAA has gone with the NIL policy. So again, very simple, and as CHSAA always does, we're in the front. We're ready to respond to however the transitions are happening outside of us. Our amateur status bylaws have always been based on what the NCAA may or may not do, and this one just speaks to that. Very simplified.
Thank you, Rhonda. Any comments or questions, clarifications? Okay, looking at ADM 9, this will be Patrick Simpson and Brian Bond on Sunday contact.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Brian.
What we wanted to try to do here is allow senior athletes that may be coached by somebody that's at their school. Once their season has completed and they're done with their official season, then now they could have contact on Sundays to do things like tournaments and out-of-state gigs and everything like that, where they would be able to go with that coach. Currently, the coach has to sideline themselves if they're on either side of the court, for example, and the kid misses out on being coached by the coaches that have impacted the most. And so what we want to be able to do is really give those seniors an opportunity to continue to be coached before they're sent off and doing it at the collegiate level. But it has no impact on really the rules that are in place, because the season has already completed, and the contact no longer has an affinity or the ability to help the program get better, because that individual would be all done in their career in high school.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thanks, Brian. Looking at athletic proposals, we'll start with athletic 1 basketball rosters. Bethany?
Okay, great. Thank you. So this bylaw change is simply coming from, I want the bulletin and what has traditionally been allowed, or has at least been allowed for the last several years, to align with the bylaws. So the bylaws currently say 12 students. Over the last couple of years, we have allowed 14 students onto a roster for basketball. If we vote against this bylaw, then the bulletin and the bylaws will align. Only 12 students will be allowed on the playoff roster for basketball. If we pass this, then the current practice of 14 plus the bylaws will be in a line. I am simply trying to avoid the current conflict. Any questions?
Awesome. Thanks, Bethany. Skiing?
Okay, great. So the let me just preface this skiing. This bylaw is supported by the ski committee. Basically, this is the current practice with the limitations on the ski resorts and race hills. There is a need to participate in some regular season events. At the conclusion of our state championship, again, the ski season is extremely small, pretty much the beginning of January to the middle of February. And so this bylaw just aligns the current practice with skiing.
Great. Thanks, Bethany. Any questions or comments? Okay, turning over to athletic 3 spirit season. This is
a question.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
Mike Jacobson, go ahead.
Yeah, Jen, I had a question back for Brian on the Sunday contact one.
Sure.
How does this apply to multi-sport athletes? You know, we know it's with volleyball, but a lot of those volleyball kids then turn and play basketball, and then they run track. So are we going to allow coaches to work with them on Sundays just in volleyball only?
Yeah, Mike, it would be the intent, or the intent was for all sports, not just volleyball, although it came from volleyball. But it would be once you've exhausted your eligibility in that sport, then you could work on Sunday contact with your coach for that sport.
Okay, so potentially they could go 7 days a week, but that's up to each family and each school to regulate that, obviously.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on Sunday contact? Brad, do you see anything?
Nope.
Perfect. Okay. So jumping to spirit season, this is just a little bit of clarification and a little bit of support towards our schools where we are. So obviously with competition season for spirit and then the sideline piece with spirit, that definitely the spirit sideline goes past that culminating event in December. And so what we've really taken out is the season shall run until the final state championship, which we know that isn't what happened. So the competition season is still going for a lot of schools in the national ranks, even though that isn't something governed under CHSAA. But really what we're looking at is the sideline. And so what we've put in here is the primary spirit seasons will fall both under fall and winter. And then if schools choose to have a spring season, outside of the tryouts, that's totally a local level decision. So that's just some clarification and really putting in what we're already doing when it comes to sideline. Any questions on that one? Okay, perfect. Looking at athletic 4 tennis, and I believe Chris Roberts is going to speak to this.
I am. I didn't put myself in as Bob Ross this meeting. This amendment simply changes the allowable tournaments to +1. So the total number of contests stays at 12. The current rule reads that you can play up to 3 tournaments and 9 duels. This would allow some scheduling flexibility, and you can play up to 4 tournaments, again, with the max contests at 12.
Anything else, Bethany, on that one? We're good there?
Yeah, I just would like to say the tennis committee does support this bylaw change.
Great. Thanks, Chris Roberts and Bethany. Looking at athletic proposal number 5, boys volleyball.
Okay, great. So boys volleyball is growing and it's really exciting. What we currently have is an extremely short season with 23 matches. So in order to just be more equitable and in comparison to the girls season, we need more weeks. So we set a precedent last year, which I think is great, of allowing boys swimming to start their practice a week earlier in the spring. We are asking for the same for boys volleyball. As you'll see in the volleyball committee report, we are also extending the season on the back end. So we'd also like to extend the season on for the practice date on the early end. Please note that even by doing this, we are still not close to the girls volleyball, but we are making progress. And so this is at least 2 additional weeks that the boys volleyball teams will have compared to this extremely short season this spring.
Great, thanks, Bethany. Any comments or questions there? Okay, moving over to activity proposals. Looking at esports, Rashawn.
For esports, we were asked to create an eligibility standard, and so we created a minimal standard, allowing schools to create a more stricter standard for eligibility, and that was the bulk of our activity report. We also established or took the wording for amateur standing and awards and put that in as well.
Okay, thank you, Rashawn. Yeah. Any other questions? Did I cut you off?
Nope, I was asking the same thing.
Okay, any questions or comments regarding esports?
Hey, Jen, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
For Sean. I think one of the things that's been some conversations amongst our athletics and activities directors is around the eligibility standard. In esports, we're going to have a state championship, and we're in Jeffco really excited about that. But then the eligibility, it says they have to be enrolled in 2.5, academic units, but they don't have to pass them, right? So they could be failing all of them as long as they're enrolled. And that's so contradictory to what we do in athletics. And so just kind of curious what your guys' thinking and the committee's thinking was on that.
Well, we did not add that last sentence about you could be failing everything. I think that would go back to that stricter standard. We wanted to make sure that we were able to allow for the differences in how we create and grow this activity by giving districts and schools the opportunity to create a stricter standard.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Also, Rashawn, if you want to just take activity 2 for student leadership.
Student leadership, we just needed to clarify some language. We did change our summer conference or summer camp to a summer conference. We also needed to establish a baseline for eligibility with student leadership. And so we again went back to 1710 and 1720. And then of course we had to align how we were able to elect or select our state representatives. I'm sorry, our state representatives. So that helped us to really clear up what eligibility would look like in order to be a state representative. Any questions?
Great, thank you, Rashawn. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, so that puts us back here at about 10:32, and we'll start on committee reports. So if everybody could get back, we just want to make sure we honor and respect your time today. So we'll plan to resume back at 10:32. Okay, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and start with committee reports. And the first one we're going to begin with is the Budget Committee. And I believe, Sarah, you're going to speak to that? And or Rhonda.
I think Rhonda wanted to start off.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. We're just going to go through a couple of things. I'm actually tag teaming. And I think I've said this more than once about being able to bring Sarah Vernon Bruner back onto CHSAA staff, back into the membership, especially in this, what is going to be a transition year. Her expertise is going to has kept me on track and is going to keep Mike Kruger on track. And so, Sarah, you're on screen, but I just want to thank you. And probably one of the best things that's going to happen to this association as we recover from the pandemic. I'll go through some of the major changes, but there's always questions about transparency, and we'll give you guys a full report at the LC, but the association has never been more transparent around finances. The last 5 years, we have budgetary tabs on our website where the public, where legislators can look and see where the association is financially. We've put out every single time our board members approve a budget, it's posted onto the website. Even after the audit is also on the financial website. So CHSAA has become way more transparent. And even in this budget report, we've provided you with some additional information that we've never shared with the membership. So just want to put that out there because I do believe that Mike and Sarah will continue to provide the membership with the information they need should someone question, where is this going? How is this happening? And that has not happened in the past. So again, I feel like this budget report is probably one of the most transparent in sharing with the membership, not only our budget projections, but also where we are on some of the membership fees and dues and the direction financially we need to go and where we need to be to recover it from the last 2 years. So just go quickly through some major changes. The budget committee voted to remain at 2.5% through 2023, 2024. And you can read the rationality, but it's really about us all being involved in not only recovery, but also, in paying out for a lawsuit that occurred prior to probably most of us being there in 2017. We really had a 2.4 judgment against us and spent a day in arbitration with the defendant, brought it down to 1.9. We are lucky because of the leaders prior to me that knew that we needed to have reserves. We were able to not put our building up. We were able to navigate and be able to pay our portion that the insurance didn't pay, but we exhausted our reserves. So in the event that something else, and we always cross our fingers and hope that that doesn't happen, we are very vulnerable right now. So in keeping it at 2.5%, we can start to put back money into those reserves. So this association is protected in the event that something catastrophic does happen, and we don't have to put the building up and we don't have to raise your membership fees or tickets or anything to pay off any of those outside external things that sometimes impact your operational budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah at some point. We're not going to give you an in-depth report today because we are going to do that at the LC. But we did provide you with the 2022-23 budget projections as well as comparisons of what that looked like when we were projecting in the middle of a pandemic and where we think we are based on as we reconcile this year's into the season financials. It's still going to be pretty flexible and variable throughout that time. But at the end of the day, the board of directors approved the final budget projections in June, but we did want you to see the direction that we think we can go, where we think the association will be at the end of 2022. 2023. It is in the black, it is positive. PPP loans do help, right? And then the other one is approved unused personnel policy. We've had a meeting with our staff today, both our salary committee as well as the budget committee, looked at what we were doing with our unused sick policy. First of all, we need our employees to take their sick days and their wellness days if those are available. But then we also started looking at the impact to the operational budget and the association's budget when you're paying out accrued days for retirees or anybody who leaves the association. And so we're looking at adjusting that policy. And we'll be working with our internal staff to get to a place that is palatable for them. But at the end of the day, it's really about what is the bottom line and the impact to you and this association when an employee retires or leaves the association. So those are the major changes within the budget. And as I said, we will be giving you more in depth. We will have some screen shares for you at LC, and we will go through some of the point by points of where we see you don't get to have a $1 million lawsuit and think that your premiums are going to stay the same. And so we will point out some of those impact areas to the operational budget for 2022, 2023. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. I always say, correct me if you need to correct me, please, but also provide them with any additional information.
Yeah, just adding to what Rhonda said, CHSAA is coming off of a couple years of losses due to the pandemic and the lawsuit. So it's great that this year, we're projecting a positive net income. And then next year, we're projecting even better, getting CHSAA back to a really stable point of pre-pandemic numbers. So just great stability we should be seeing from CHSAA. Revenue-wise, with ticket sales picking up, you're seeing pre-pandemic revenue numbers. And then expense-wise, we're really trying to conserve as much as we can. Costs are going up in several areas, like venue costs, for example, but we're going to invest where we need to for the membership, like in officials and recruitment, sportsmanship, our corporate insurance policy, as Rhonda mentioned, to better protect us so that we are more prepared for future situations. So overall stability next year, higher net income, which will, help CHSAA be able to put some back in our reserves to be prepared for the future. All right, anything else to add, Rhonda? Okay.
Okay, looking at CR2 clock for Rhonda.
All right, self-explanatory through the major changes. I love that the membership, and I'm going to give Lutheran High School credit on this for opening the door to say that second meeting in the off year should be, and this is where I line that with the LC. These are some of the things that have been put into place to allow the clock committee or the membership to address any issues that are individualized and not this social type opportunity. But this meeting, the clock committee meeting this year, was to look at appeals that may have been overlooked, or new situations have arisen with new schools. We had an issue with the Montbello far northeast, in which the clock committee had approved something one year for Montbello, and then a change with some district changes with far northeast. And this clock committee had to come together to make that right for the kids at that school. And it was after the fact. So having this second clock committee meeting that is really about addressing appeals or anything that may have been missed in the April meeting is what this report is about. So self-explanatory on approving new leagues. I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't follow the bylaws. I extended time periods so that our schools could get, and the leagues could get themselves formed in the best interest of their programs. And so the clock committee was able to approve those new leagues, new school placement, classification placements, as well as any clock committee appeals that were brought forth by the CHSAA commissioners, another bylaw that you passed that allowed the commissioners to bring your situations in front of the clock committee without it being a repetitive meeting of the year before. So I'll leave it at that. League changes, we try to put all the information in there so you are aware of it. And then whatever informational items, there weren't very many, but we did want to have a disclaimer statement because that seems to be a conversation within the membership. Well, why did A get this and B get this, or B didn't get this and A? And there's just this comparison around, and then the CHSAA staff is asked to justify what the clock committee has made decisions on. So clock committee came up with a disclaimer statement that will be in the bylaw book. Each individual case is looked at based upon their decision. And so that's also provided for you. So when you see that in the handbook next year, you would have approved it through the Legislative Council. So with that said, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Rhonda. Any questions or comments for the clock committee? Moving to CR3, Adam with coaching, education, and registration.
So number one there is pretty easy. No major changes from last year's report. A couple things I would touch on is that working with CHSAA on possible continuing education for coaches. I do think that's something that's going to be important to us in the coming years. And then there was also some discussion around the You Can Play and Sports Equity Foundation and potential pieces of their training and how we can put that into our coaches education piece. There's some value there in that partnership. So we want to continue looking at how we can integrate that into our coaches ed. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. Anything for the coaches? Any questions or comments there? Seeing none. Going to Bethany for equity.
Okay, great. I'm going to just echo what Adam just mentioned. No major changes for equity. However, the equity committee does strongly recommend that schools and districts start looking at an inclusive coach training for all coaches. And we also support the You Can Play organization. Again, the training's mission is to ensure that students feel safe and included when they participate in sports and activities. And You Can Play and CHSAA seek to challenge the culture of locker rooms and spectator areas by developing a culture of respect in every player, coach, and fan. So again, just know that we certainly support this organization and any sort of inclusive coach training opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. Officials fees.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, Mike Book is the chair of the committee and will be speaking on this.
Okay, first, if I may, I'd like to just take a quick moment to say that I myself, Wiggins High School, and officials across the state are certainly saddened by the loss of Mr. Robinson. We know Mr. Robinson was first and foremost an incredible man and a very influential man in Colorado high school athletics and officials across the state. So just wanted to send our condolences to his family, the CHSAA, and officials across the state. So no major changes really for the officials fees committee. Just highlight that in 2019, Legislative Council approved the schedule for officials fees up to, I believe, 2029. And so just to highlight that the Colorado Springs, Denver metro area travel fee will increase from $6 to $10 in this next cycle. And then obviously the 2% cost of living that will increase each year for those 10 years. So those are really the two highlights of it. And the rest is in the report.
Thanks, Mike. I think I subliminally just missed esports. I think I was just trying to get through the officials report as it's tough for all of us in this office. So I apologize, Rashawn, going back to you with esports.
As I said earlier, we were just asked to create an eligibility standard. So we did create the minimal standard, and And then, of course, move to allow schools to create that stricter standard. Only major change. Otherwise, I would say we are looking forward to our spring championship on April 28th.
Awesome. Thanks, Rashawn. Any questions regarding esports? Seeing none, Rashawn will take CR7, sportsmanship.
Sportsmanship has no major changes. The committee, of course, does encourage the continued banner, the sportsmanship planning and assessment, and of course, game fan behavior expectations. Otherwise, no major changes.
Great. Thanks, Rashawn. Looking at sportsmanship, or sorry, not sportsmanship, SMAC. Just want to thank you to Kevin Clark, who's chaired this committee this year. It's been under Larry's watch for several times through different kind of re-anding that up as we developed sports medicine and what its position was within CHSAA. And so huge thank you to Larry Bull for all of his work, and thank you to Kevin Clark for picking up right where he left off and continue to move us forward. We have no major changes, but we are going through some different things and updating and making things a little bit user friendly, whether it's coming from air quality, the bloodborne infections to the cold weather. Again, putting in those best practices and those protocols and utilizing your areas to make those decisions. Again, always plugging the EAPs that definitely need to be at all levels, whether it's practice, C-level, or varsity, having those venue-specific emergency action plans ready to go and worked throughout each year to make sure that they're up to date. With that is it for sports medicine. Excited that they will be in front of you all at the All School Summit, as they normally are, to give an update, but really looking to do a new initiative this year where we get athletic trainers all in one room, some of those first care responders, if they don't have athletic trainers, and doing some dialogue and some education around certain things with them. So that we look forward to doing over those 2 days as well. Looking at tournament and playoff and finance, Sarah.
All right, first want to thank Dave Walk for his leadership with this committee as the chair. So a couple major changes. One was we added a no gate fee to 6-man football of $400 because they didn't previously have one, and they have some need for that in their locations. And we arrived at that number by looking at gate receipts, the money paid to CHSAA, a variety of things to come up with an appropriate number. Another major change was that we added some language in the TPNF handbook around security expenses. To say that assistant commissioners can approve postseason security expenses. So, sometimes playoff games require greater security versus a regular season game. And so we want to encourage dialogue around that so that everything's taken into consideration around the security piece.
Great. Any other questions there? Okay, looking at activity committee report.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jason.
So has there been, I don't know if this is for Dave or Sarah or anybody on that committee, has there been any thought to increasing like allowable expenses? For example, safety measures to put in place, and just cost of running these events, in my opinion, has gone up substantially the last few years. So I didn't know if that has been brought up or discussed, or what the feedback would be on that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Adam, maybe you have something else to add too, but there are a few things we're going to evaluate for next year. One of them is just looking at other no gate fees, so we can add that to our list. Security was kind of a bigger topic this year, but you're right. I mean, a lot of those expenses haven't been looked at or adjusted in a while, so we can look at that as well.
Great. Adam, do you have anything to add? No.
No, Sarah got it. Okay,
perfect. Thank you, guys. Looking at activity committee report, CR10, music.
I definitely want to give a shout out to Kevin Bieber from Crowley County as he rotates off as our committee chair. He, of course, was our NFHS section winner for Music Educator Award. Otherwise, no major changes for music. Questions there?
Okay,
And then,
rolling right over. Yeah, rolling over to CR 11, speech.
For speech and debate, the major changes, of course, starting this upcoming year, we will be going to 3 classifications, 3A, 4A, and 5A versus the festival or small school tournament, and then the large school tournament. So big changes there. Other highlights, we will be piloting a program this upcoming year in Arbiter to do some background checks for our judges. And of course, judge pay does increase. And then of course, the other 2 major changes for speech and debate, we are looking at a sweepstakes or a team award will be new, and we'll pilot that in the upcoming year. And the last, of course, is individual awards will align more with what we see in, say, track and wrestling for kids. So those are the major changes for speech and debate. Any questions? Moving on to CR12. Student leadership, as I said earlier, we just changed some of the language to align a little bit better with electing or selecting our state representatives and the changeover from a summer camp to a summer conference. Any questions on student leadership? Thank you.
Awesome. Just a quick shout out to Rashawn, which he never likes these, but what he's done with activities over this past year is amazing. And I'm sure you've all had a chance to witness that, from whether it's his activity meetings he's doing, his advisor you, or just putting his mark on all these activities. We hear nothing but positives on how he's elevated those. And so Rashawn, just publicly, thank you for all your work and your continued work. We appreciate you. Okay, looking at athletic committee reports, we'll start with CR 13 baseball with Adam.
All right, sorry. So baseball committee report. Thanks to the guys on the committee for helping with this one. First change is sub-varsity time limit with 2 hours max. That would be looking to go into effect next year. Seeding changes 2A through 5A. 32 teams will qualify. League champions that are not in the top 32 would be put on the bracket. Your 8 highest max prep / RPI combined rankings would be your hosts. And then you would seed 9 through 32, 24 through 32 would be allowed to have the possible geographic move. And in the first round, we would avoid league matchups. And then lastly, game minimum for 1A would be 12, 2A, 3A, 17, 4A, 5A, 19. So those are the changes that came about this year. I do believe it makes the seeding process of baseball a little bit easier, and it's more transparent throughout the season exactly where you stand as you head towards the postseason.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Any questions regarding baseball?
Yeah, Jen, I have one. Adam, I guess I see the 2 hour time limit for baseball instituted and would like to kind of get some rationale for why that is placed in here. With already a limited number of non-league or games in general for baseball, 19 games, a minimum or maximum for sub-varsity, to cut the time limit to 2 hours. What's the rationale there other than trying to eliminate long games? I get that. Nobody wants super, super long games, but there's competitive.
It's not even the length of the game, Mike. It's actually, this one was actually brought to us by our officials. Unfortunately, they have the opportunity to either work one of our sub-varsity games with no time limit, or they can go down the street and work a club, little league, whatever verb you want to use there to describe whatever that other entity is, where there is a time limit. The pay is more, so they can go work more games in a day for higher pay. This is trying to level out the playing field a little bit as far as with officials to get them to work our games. we're also not having to go through and go back a couple of reports earlier to officials' fees and things like that. We're not digging into that piece because we know that's a fight that we're not going to solve today. So this was a way to try to assist in that. Right now we have a 2-hour, 15-minute minimum. So what we're doing is for the sub-varsity level, so JVC teams, et cetera, putting a 2-hour cap on that. A lot of our leagues do have a cap, but it's also inconsistent across the state. So this would go in. Another thing the official said is, unfortunately, an official can choose. If I have multiple options in Arbiter to go choose where I want to go, I can go to one that I know has a time limit as opposed to one that doesn't. So it's just recognizing some of the obstacles we're up against with our sub-varsity games and our officials.
I understand that, and Adam, I'm thankful that you're aware of some officials who may be selective based on completion of a contest. I mean, it's 7 innings. They know that going in. I really struggle in one-run contests and games that can be there for a kid to say, hey, I'm not going to get to finish this game because this umpire didn't want to finish it because it was after 2 hours. I don't know why we want to do that to our kids, to be honest. So I get it. I think there's some shortages, but to do that to kids we've got to keep them as the focus, not the adults who want to seem to work less by putting things in place.
I would just tell you that I don't disagree with you. I'd also tell you that I do think this does put kids in focus, because if we don't make changes, there's not going to be anybody officiate the game. So unless you got your gear in your closet there in your office, it's going to be tough to get those JV games in without umpires.
Well, if I'm umpiring those games, Adam, they're going to be fast anyway. There's a lot of strikes. So
I hear you there. Exactly. You got a bat in your hand, you better use it. I understand.
Chris Roberts, I think you have your hand raised.
Yes, please. Thank you. Just clarifying question on this. So I read the first 2 sentences as different. So the first part says the 2-hour max. That to me means the game's over 2 hours in. The second sentence says no new innings after 2-hour time limit. So is it no new after 2, or is the game over at 2?
So it actually, the game is over at 2. What was discussed was finishing the inning that is currently going on after the 2, but not starting anything new. I'm with you. I do think they read separately. I believe the intent was to have the game end at 2. But as Mike was speaking, I think it's even worse to go out and a kid has got a full count, et cetera, and we just raise our hands and say that's 2 hours, we're over. So
I would agree. I think it's going to cause arguments with coaches and ADs and umpires, because those I already said it, but the 2-hour max means that, because that's what they're used to, right? That's what you mentioned down the street. They they drop the baseballs on home plate and walk off the field. So either I think it has to be we go this way, it has to be a 2-hour max, and we know that, and we're going to deal with what we just talked about, or there's no new inning after 2. I just think those are not, it's confusing and will cause disagreements.
So on that piece, what I would tell you is I will get with committee members and kind of get a poll from those guys and provide an email response to the membership before we go to legislative council on exactly what their intention is on that bullet A.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Any other discussion? Anything else you see, Brad?
Jen, Brian had his hand up.
Okay, Brian.
He answered the part of the question where it's, can we go back and can we just change the verbiage in here to make sure that it's crystal clear? But I'd be in favor of no new inning after the 2-hour time. And after talking to multiple officials across the state, they were all in favor of that idea as well. We talked about it as a Jeffco group with an official in the room, and that's where we kind of landed. So I think that's the information that's at least being provided by officials that we've talked to in the Jeffco League.
Okay, so thanks, Adam. Adam will connect and get some clarifying information out after connecting with his committee. Moving over to basketball, CR 14, Bethany, followed by an amendment from Jeffco. So we'll go through that first. Bethany.
Awesome. Yep. A huge thank you to the basketball committee, our chair, Sean, from Pagosa Springs, who has led this committee for the last 6 years, and just all the work that the committee members have done to try to figure out the 6 classifications. So that leads to the major changes. The biggest major change is that there's going to be consistency among seeding for all classifications next year. And I believe all sports, all team sports, but the seeding and selection index, whatever it's called, which is 50% max preps and then 50% RPI. So that's how teams will be seeded and selected, a consistent message. And then we also, like I said, created a 6 classification playoff format. And so everything had to be recreated from bracket size to calendars, etc. A brief overview is that classifications 1 through 3 have districts and then move to a 32 team, essentially regional bracket, and advance from there. There's still a consolation bracket for 1A and 2A teams at state. And then the third and fourth place game will still be played at 3A. So no changes really in that last week of what that looks like for the 1A through 3A classifications at state. The 4A, 5A, and 6A classifications will have a 32 team bracket. And then all classifications will have a grade 8 hosted at a neutral site over 3 days. And then the following weekend will be the final 4 at a neutral site. With that being said, I would entertain any questions. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Bethany. So looking at the amendment report, remove 6A classification for basketball coming from the Jeffco League. I think Patrick Simpson and Mike Hughes, is that correct?
Yes, and then Jen, I'll chime in. They were waiting on me for a response.
Okay.
I was able to speak with former commissioners as well as look at the parliamentarian procedures. Once I posted the final packet on Friday, this information becomes the will of the body. And so though we discussed potentially pulling this proposal, I don't have the authority to do that. So in discussion with Patrick and Mike Hughes, we will probably, and Patrick or Mike, please chime in if I'm not correct on this, is that once it comes to the Legislative Council, we will ask the Legislative Council not to provide a second. So the proposal would die for a lack of second, and then move forward for discussion at some other time with the basketball committee and allow it to go through the 2-year cycle. So that's just an update that Patrick and Mike are getting, but in investigation and research, I'm not able to pull this. And so we can have it die for a lack of second at the meeting in April. So.
And part of that too, Rhonda, to clarify me if I'm wrong here, but we are not able to amend the basketball committee report. We would have to go back and amend the clock report from 2021. And that's part of the one of the challenges that we face, correct?
Well, and I would say if we thought that this was, impactful for the way that we needed to move forward, even though it would be a challenge, we absolutely would do that on the behalf of Jeffco or anyone else. But yes, the logistics of this is that we would have to reopen the 2021 report, and we're not even sure if you can even go back and open classification reports or constitution bylaws after they've been approved by the Legislative Council. And so that would be a logistical problem and getting some clarification on that. But I think what we talked about has nothing to do with the logistics, but whether or not we want to allow this classification to progress through 2 cycles and then bring it back to the basketball committee. And if you see that there are some issues that you guys would be able to move forward in a timely manner within the basketball report, correct?
Yeah, I think our intent from the beginning has been just, this is one of those situations where we just wanted to have conversation with the membership about, is this truly the right thing? And I also have a little bit of a sneak peek because I'm on the basketball committee. But there is substantial work that goes in and impact on our leagues around multi-classification leagues. There's financial ramifications. There's, the potential of having teams below 500 maybe make the playoffs. And is that truly what's best for kids or not?
Yes.
And so I think there's just a lot. And so our league's intent from the beginning, because correct me if I'm wrong on those logistics, but when it was brought forward by, I think it was Paul Kane, onto the floor, around 60% of the membership voted to not approve this, but because it came from the floor, we didn't hit the 2/3 majority. And so there was a lot of questions in our mind. And so we wanted to facilitate conversation around, is this really the right direction for us? That was the intent of this proposal.
Sure.
But now looking at the bomb that it could drop on the system, I don't think that's really what our league is intended to do. Going through the logistics of, is it even possible to open a committee report? That was not our intent. The work that it would put on Bethany and or the basketball committee to then have to create leagues and classifications really on the fly, and then to take the possible ramifications of not having the ability to appeal those because of the timelines are so different. That's not our intent, is to do that. So what we are asking from the Jeffco League is that we would let this die on the floor. We are not going to second it or ask that no one seconds it, so it dies. And then we fully plan on bringing it back for conversation, whether that be in November at the clock and go through that process, or whether it's through basketball committee or both.
Yes.
Just to have the conversation, and what happens. But that is our intent. So Mike, clarify if there's anything I missed there.
No, excellently put, well said. Although I am in favor of Bethany working incredibly hard for the next 3 weeks to try and put together something. I am with you as far as us letting this die for a lack of a second. I do want to posit, though, that we understand as a group, I think our part of this, and again, from me personally advocating for a second legislative council meeting, which I think would have really helped this process through, and the ability to change a little sooner would have helped mightily in this regard. And the other thing is we ask the CHSAA and some people to really let this take hold for 2 years before we try and add another classification to any other sport, that we at least really vet this out, and we're really thoughtful about the way we're going forward. We didn't feel like the number of schools was ever met to add a classification that we had set from clock many years ago. And that is in the pros and cons part of this. We still feel there's a lot of reasons to do away with 6A, but at this point, we just feel like it's really too late in the process, and that we're good to move forward as the committee has proposed. We just are going to look to make some small alterations going forward.
Yes, and I think that's what this meeting's for, right? CADA and CHSAA, to have discussion. And I think I said this with Patrick and Mike, that if we're going to continue to look at competitive equity, we're going to continue to look at lessening the classification numbers, the spread from a high-end 4A school to the lower end of this 4A school, and giving our student athletes hope. You are going to have to look at expanding classifications. All state associations are in those kinds of discussions. Several have looked at adding 2 classifications in some of the more visible sports. They've even looked at like 5A classification with an A and B under the classification. This is about kids. It is about giving kids more opportunity. And I guess it's my thought, and I think it's the thought after going through season C, what giving kids hope and the opportunity to make it to a playoff round. I think stories about 30 years you haven't made it to the state championship isn't a good story. We should be creating competitive opportunities for our students. And so if that means adding another class or another layer or another opportunity for our students in our schools to rally around and have culture around, I'm only putting this out there. I absolutely agree with Mike and Patrick on maybe more discussion, and we don't have that administrator here in our office, so we don't know what occurred there. That report would not have even been in a January legislative council meeting, so you would have still been discussing it in April. But I do believe it's time for our state association to look at expanding opportunities, whether that's basketball, whether that's, I mean, we're doing it in lacrosse, we're doing it in ice hockey, because there isn't competitive opportunities and fairness when we're staying stuck in a 5 classification system and our membership is growing, and we are seeing those gaps in numbers. So thank you for even considering looking at this at another time, but the conversation is much bigger than basketball. How are we providing more opportunities within our sports? And I think other groups have already seen that it really truly is about giving hope, the opportunity to be in playoffs and potentially be a state champion, whether that's in season A or C or whatever that is. It provides a whole new dynamic to a school's culture, because the public perceives playoff opportunities and state championships as successful. So I'll just leave it at that. But thank you, Mike and Patrick, because I think this gives us more opportunity to have conversation around that.
Hey, Rhonda, one thing can I add? Kind of a shout out and a thank you to Bethany on this. Full transparency, I called Bethany to share we were going to, possibly go down this road and have the conversation just out of professional courtesy. I felt like that was the right thing to do. And Bethany's response to me was, okay, let's figure it out. Like, we'll get it done one way or another. We'll have the conversation. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
No problem, Patrick. But if it would have passed, you would be figuring out 5 classifications with me, just so you know.
Very good. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for the dialogue and conversation around that. Moving over to cross country, no major changes and no informational items at this time. So pretty quick, and we'll go over to CR 16. Field hockey.
I'll wait for us to, I think football's next. Or do we skip field hockey?
Well, we shouldn't have skipped field hockey, but.
Come on, Brad.
Brad, can you go back one and then see? Oh, something's missing there. Okay. Justin, do you just want to give a?
Yeah, I can certainly.
I can see if it's after football and just numbered wrong, Brad, but.
See where we stand here. Yeah. Pretty typical there. So I'll go ahead and cover field hockey despite you all not being able to see it on the screen. So we've got 4 major changes. If you look at field hockey, there we go. If you look at field hockey, the number of players on the field and the roster, I think are most similar to soccer. And so we tried to mirror the gate list for the postseason for those 2 sports. You'll see the change in soccer as well, but we've added 4 to the gate list for the postseason for field hockey. Again, the reason there was to make that as similar as possible with the sport of soccer, and there was a need for that. The mercy rule as well, you'll see the change in soccer and in field hockey. We will no longer take players off the field. We thought that was kind of going against what we're trying to do with being able to sub players in, get people into the game. And when you're starting to take players off the field, it limits opportunities for student athletes maybe to get some playing time that they normally would not have gotten. So we got rid of that. The overtime procedure for field hockey, we're trying to end the game without having to go into what we call the one-on-ones, which is similar to like a penalty shootout there. So we've gone to a sudden death as opposed to before you would play out the entire first overtime to its conclusion. So even if somebody scored, the game kept going on. And we've also limited reduced the number of players on the field. So we'll go right into a 7v7 as opposed to the 11v11, which was what it was before. And that does mirror what the NCAA is doing. So we wanted to be sure that we were in line with them as far as the overtime process. And then you'll see this kind of constant theme throughout with all the sports. But, we created that committee to find the best way to capture our state tournament brackets. And the determination from that committee was that we needed to capture the bracket using 50% max preps, 50% RPI. And so we felt like if that's the best way to get you into the bracket, then why would it not also be the best way to seed the bracket? So the field hockey committee moving forward, we'll use the 50% RPI, 50% max preps, So you will get into the bracket and you'll be seated on the bracket in the exact same way. It's just going to avoid some confusion. You're going to see those rankings of kind of where you're at throughout the year. And then all of a sudden the bracket comes out and you were fourth and now all of a sudden you're seventh and you're asking those questions. That won't happen anymore. So we want to just kind of have that consistency, that transparency throughout the season and use the same formula. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Any questions or feedback? Perfect. Moving over to CR17 football with Adam.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and start talking about adding 7A and 8A and 9A for football, because that just seems like it'd be a fun conversation to have in the next few months. So in your report here, summer 21 rules go forward. What we'd like to do is offer the option that we had last year for schools that were during the ending of the COVID pandemic, where you could either have your 10-day contact camp during the summer and start on 8/7, or not have that summer contact camp and start on August 1st and then get the additional scrimmage. Both would follow the same summer lead up heat acclimation days for whichever option you choose. If you did choose the summer camp, when you come back to start fall practice, you would follow the traditional fall lead up heat acclimation period. Postseason formats, this was pulled from the membership, and what that came back with was 5A, 4A, 3A, and 8-man. The high seed will host until the finals. In 2A and 6-man, the high seed will host the semifinals. And then in 1A, there's no real change there. That'll be the high seed would host in round 1, and then whoever has the fewer home games thereafter would host the home game. And then seeding, as Justin just said, with max reps and RPI. That'll seed and set the field. League champs would be on the bracket, not guaranteed to host. And then lastly, the scrimmage verbiage, rather than day of scrimmage, we would use that each student athlete is allowed 1 and/or 2 scrimmages based on which option you choose. We do have an old form that we used to use where you had to declare if you're going to have a summer camp or not. We would go back to using that same form. So you would fill that out if you're going to host a 10-day summer contact camp or do the fall camp option. And that's it.
I'm just waiting for questions because it's football. Any questions? Comments? Okay. Moving on to golf. Justin?
Yeah, I'll take golf and I'll try to do that justice here. So a couple of changes. The first change that you'll see here, if you've read over this, the wording that you'll see in A is already included in the bulletin. The only change that we've got here is the exception. And that says that during the girls' golf season only, if a significant number of scheduled events for all teams have been reduced because of weather-related issue, the minimum number of required rounds needed to establish an IWR, so your I-Want-to-Maker ranking, will be adjusted by the golf committee on that Monday. So for some reason, obviously golf starts in February if there's weather, and that student athlete cannot get to the 6 required meets that's in the wording here, that's currently in the bulletin, that the golf committee can then come in and reduce the number of required tournaments played, rounds played for that player to establish that ranking. B is a new addition here. So exempt to the state tournament will be the top 6 in the regular season I-Want-to-Maker ranking. So again, you've got those stipulations on how many rounds you have to play. If you are in the top 6 of the I-Want-to-Maker rankings and you fail to qualify at the regional tournament, so if you don't make the, essentially don't make the cut, then you would be exempt into the state tournament field. Now, this is not to say the top 6 that don't qualify. This is just the top 6. So if you are 7th, the top 6 in the I-Want-to-Maker rankings all qualify through the regional. You're 7th in the I-Want-to-Maker rankings and you don't qualify, you are not exempt because you're the highest ranked non-auto qualifier. It's only a player who is in the top 6 and they must play in the regional. They cannot, go to a tournament somewhere else, as an example, and not participate in the regional. But if they participated in the regional and they did not make the cut, they did not qualify for the state tournament, and they are in the top 6, they will be exempt into the state tournament. So I don't know if this was covered. I don't believe the golf report was covered at the round table. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great job, Justin. Thanks so much. Looking at gymnastics, no major changes. One thing the committee wanted me to just stress is that the submission of team rosters into CHSAA through that platform that's always been there with CHSAA now has to be done by September 6th. So that'll be a hard deadline that we'll work with schools and coaches to get in. But other than that, that's it for gymnastics. Looking at ice hockey, back over to Justin.
Yep, so major changes here for ice hockey again. The theme will be consistent. We wanted to seed and capture the tournament bracket in the same way, so we'll do that here with ice hockey. Beginning in the winter 22-23 season, so starting next cycle, we will have mandatory crossover games between the 4A Mountain League and then one of the other 4A leagues. We have 3 leagues in both 4A and 5A. And so we spoke about that at the committee meeting. One league will take one cycle. So you play a home and away in the first cycle, and then it'll rotate over to the other league for the next cycle. And so I did have a couple of questions. Kent Denver called me yesterday. So if you are trying to already put together your ice hockey schedule for the next cycle, the 4A Northern League, so that league there with Kent, CA, Mullen, and those schools, they will be the first to cross over with the Mountain League next year. And that's just a way to get that Mountain League some games, because they were really struggling to get schools to come up to them with any kind of consistency. And so filling out their schedule was nearly impossible. And so we felt like this was the best way to ensure them the games they needed and having light competition in that 4A classification as well. And then no school would be, would have to go up to a school in the mountains, more than once over a 4-year period. So just wanted to kind of give that background to that one. And then the third major change is that beginning winter 22-23, so next cycle, in the postseason only, at the end of regulation, the way it currently is, there's no ice make. So at the end of the third period, if the game's tied in the postseason, they go right into the first overtime. The coaches felt like the ice quality wasn't up to the level of a playoff game. And so we will have an ice make. The Zamboni, those of you not familiar with some of that lingo, the Zamboni will come out. We'll get an ice make after the third period. And then we will begin with our first overtime after we've made the ice. We will play 3 overtimes before the next ice make. So really, the difference here is that we're still going to have the one ice make after 3 overtimes, no different really than what we're doing. There's still going to be that ice make, but it's going to happen early. So if a game were to go in like the 4th overtime, the time differential, there will be no time differential, but a game ending maybe in the first overtime, there would have been no ice make. So that would have been really quick. Now we've got the ice make, a 15-minute break before we come back on the ice. So there could be some added time there if a game ends in one of the earlier overtimes. But we felt that was necessary to make sure that the ice quality was to the standard of the postseason. So.
Awesome. Any questions or comments for Justin? And then Justin, I think you go right back into lacrosse.
Lacrosse also made.
Boys and girls, yep.
Yep. So boys lacrosse, only major change again is just the seed capture being the same. That's the only change that we got.
Great, thanks, Justin. Looking at skiing. Oh, girls.
I think we've got girls lacrosse.
Sorry, yep, girls lacrosse.
Yep. So we've got the seed and capture being the same. So we'll capture and seed the bracket in the exact same way. Spoke about that when we did field hockey. And then B, you can disregard because that change because of the inequity there between the number of qualifiers in 4A girls and 5A boys. The board of directors felt it was such to make that change effective immediately. So there will be 24 postseason qualifiers this spring in 4A girls lacrosse. So no need to consider B there.
Great, thanks, Justin. Okay, looking at skiing with Bethany.
Okay, great. No major changes, and just a thank you to Summit High School, who has volunteered graciously to host our state races next year.
Awesome. Back to Justin for soccer.
Yeah, I was gonna try to get a glass of water there. All right, so we talked about it again in field hockey. The mercy rule no longer will include taking players off the field. Spoke about some of those reasons in field hockey, so I won't go into detail here. But nothing's changed with the mercy rule other than the not removing players off the field. We have a game minimum added to all classifications. Currently, there's only a game minimum for two-way soccer, which is 12 games played, 10 against NFHS opponents. That'll now carry over for all 2A, 3A, 4A, and 5A classifications. Obviously, with that wording in there, that a reasonable attempt to play all the games is made. And so we obviously understand that weather and travel on the western slope, and there's a lot of factors that go into being able to play all these games, and they will absolutely be considered when looking at that game minimum. Beginning next cycle as well, we're going to add those two non-rostered players. Bethany actually asked me that question. She said, are you adding rostered players? So field hockey, soccer, the addition to that gate list is for a non-rostered player. So they will not change the number of players eligible to participate in the game. We've just had the issue come up with, maybe an extra manager, a videographer, whatever it might be, or a kid who's played some games. They just want to be on the bench, but they're not going to be in uniform. So we've added those non-rostered spots to field hockey and soccer. We have also the seating capture will be the same. And then the last change is that beginning next cycle, leagues of 3 or more will get 1 auto qualifier. Currently, if you're in a league of 3 to 6, you get 1, 7 or more, you get 2. We are just that changes now. Leagues of 3 schools or more will get 1 auto qualifier, and there will no longer be a league that will get 2 auto qualifiers. And that just kind of lines up more with how we're doing it with auto qualifiers for the sports. So.
Great, Justin. Now you do need some water after that. Any questions or comments for Justin with soccer? He'll be back, so don't worry. You'll have another opportunity. Looking at Spirit, one major change is we are looking at dance performers or the performance boundaries. It's always been a 50 by 50. This will increase to 52 by 54. Because at the state competition, we are elevated on the floor. We haven't removed those completely, but if they step out of the bounds, not off the floor, but out of the bounds, there will be no penalty. This is just, as kind of local and other dance competitions. And as we get to nationals, when dance teams are having to come to state, perform, they're having to be a little bit more squished than they would in those others. So we're just trying to make it equitable and easier on both the coach and the athletes, and then ultimately a safety issue on the bigger ones. This has been a conversation, and I will just tell you it has been for the smaller schools who might not have a lot of those dancers and feel like they have to fill a bigger space. So just eliminating it altogether. And my hope is at some point we get to just a center court situation and we're not worried about any of it. So that's coming to you from Spirit. Any questions? Okay, back to Justin for swimming and diving.
Me again. Yeah, they're gonna start the music on me here pretty soon. So we've got, I think just one change for swim and dive. And it's just simply that we will begin the state meet on Wednesday as opposed to Thursday. And we were able to condense that entire event, 3A, 4A, and 5A girls state swimming, from 5 days to 4 days. We can fit two sessions of diving in on Wednesday, eliminates the need to come back for a second week. So you had one classification that would have to come back the following Tuesday and Wednesday because of, fell on President's Day. And so you'd have your league meets on Saturday, you go a whole week and then come back the following Tuesday, just too much time off. So we'll go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We'll get all 3 classifications in the same week, reduce the number of days, reduce the cost for one fewer day of rental for the facility. And it's just a better change all the way around.
Great, thank you. And I was so excited to give the Spirit report, I forgot softball. So Adam, I'm going to jump back to you for softball.
Thanks. Softball minimum games, 17 for 3A, 19 for 4A and 5A. 4A, 5A regionals can be a single field 2-day event. So we're not going to require that you go rent the facility now to see if we can save some money there. As Justin's mentioned, the trends, MAC Treps and RPI will be used for seeding and to set the field. League champs again still making it in, but not guaranteed to host. And then state warm-up area is adjusted, giving us a little more space in the outfield. And then your music/team speakers only after conclusion of the previous game and during your portion of in and out. And that is your softball report.
Thanks, Adam. Sorry about that. I think we have some, Bethany, do you see some Q&As or some chat going on there?
It was only about softball. Everyone was
everybody was eager
excited to hear the softball changes.
Very good. Okay, any other questions or comments for Adam regarding that? Sorry about that, Adam. Okay, moving to Bethany for tennis.
Okay, great. So we do have some exciting changes for tennis. The first one, and I just want to, I guess, preface this by saying we had a subcommittee that looked and talked to coaches and administrators over the last year. And gosh, we talked for hours, but this is what we came up with for this coming cycle. The first major change is that we are going to now have a dual team championship as well as an individual championship format. And so in the past, what we have done and what we'll do this spring is that we have a nifty bracket that awards both individual winners, and you also accumulate team points by advancing through that bracket. We're going to keep the individual tournament the same, and we are going to add a dual team championship. So we're going to have a 16-team bracket happen throughout the season and culminate the Tuesday after the individual championship, where the final two teams are going to battle it out, very similar to college. And it's going to be a true representation of the best team winner. It's not going to be who, you faced in the bracket, but it's truly, those 7 positions against each other. So that will happen this fall, and we're excited. We also reviewed and revised the regional team placement for all classification. This is an annual review. However, I do want to take your attention to the changes. I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, but we are going to mirror the wrestling regional format, where we essentially took the top 16 finishers from last year, and we made sure that 2 of those top 16 teams are in a region. This is just for the 4A boys. It will also be for the 3A and 4A girls after this year's results. And we've also then tried to keep it geography. So there's this age-old discussion on trying to figure out equitable ways to place teams, predetermined place teams into regionals. 5A has a waterfall system that works great. 4A has challenges with that waterfall system. And so this year, there are some minor tweaks to some schools that may have to travel a little bit more, just to try to get some more competitive equity, as well as keeping geography at the forefront of those regions. So with that being said, there are going to be a few calendar changes. So with the 16-team bracket. So just make sure that you're well aware of that. That 16-team bracket will be announced prior to regionals. And again, we're really excited, and the tennis committee has spent a ton of hours on this. Are there any questions for tennis? Okay.
Great, thanks, Bethany. Looking at track and field, we have no major changes and no major informational items. So we're good there unless there's any questions. And then moving over to unified bowling, one change is that we will go from the state tournament from 3 games to 5 games. They are so quick and they get done so quick. They're traveling more than they're actually participating. And it's just an awesome event, and we just want to extend it. So looking to do 5 games at both regionals and state, and we'll keep the Baker's format. Any questions regarding unified bowling? Okay, looking at volleyball.
Okay, so the major changes for volleyball this year, one is that in order to be guaranteed the automatic berth for leagues, leagues must have a minimum of 5 teams in order to have that automatic berth to regionals. So that is the first time that we've set a minimum on that. Like the rest of the team sports, we're aligning the seeding and the selection criteria to the 50% max preps, 50% CHSAA RPI. And then also altering the boys volleyball bracket It's going to, this spring, we had to alter it because there's no such thing as an 8-team Olympic crossover. So this spring is an 8-team double elimination, and that same format will continue next year. There is no if needed match. So once that comes to the finals, that is the final championship match. The biggest change truly is that with the growth of boys volleyball, we are going to increase the number of qualifiers for regionals only. Right now, regionals for boys volleyball is only a 2-team region. So there's only 16 teams total. That will be increased to 24 teams. So 3 teams in each region, which is exactly what we do for girls volleyball. And then the state bracket will remain at 8 teams. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, B. And wrestling, CR32.
All right, wrestling. We're gonna adjust the girls to 4 regions starting this next cycle. So the girls will have 4 regionals, hopefully geographically spread out a little bit. And then we're gonna be adopting the new NFHS weights, 14 for girls and the new 14 weights for boys. This is a mandate that had to be done by next July, so we're just going to be a little bit ahead of the schedule, but these were already listed in your NFHS rulebook this year. So again, 14 for girls, 14 for guys. And then we're going to adjust your state seeding criteria. And so think of this kind of as a tiebreaker type of system, essentially, when it goes and seeds guys. So first one's on the board will be your returning state points, and that's 3-year cumulative. Then your regional champs, and then it'll be winning percentage, and then total number of wins. Once those are all on the board seated 1 through 16, then the head-to-head criteria would come into effect. This is similar to how regionals are done, where we would go through and once everybody is seated, then you adjust one line at a time. So if 4 beat number 2 head-to-head, it wouldn't matter because you would have had to beat number 3. So it's got to be the person next to you. So each time you do it, you go back to the top and start over again and work your way down until you got all the head-to-heads in place. And then so that's, again, similar to regionals. And then the committee would like to see competitive days change to 12 days of tournament and 10 duels. Right now with the 10-10 current system, there is an open weekend in the season if you want to do 2-day tournaments each weekend. So that was discussed amongst the committee about changing that to 12 days of tournament and 10 duels as opposed to 10-10. That's your wrestling report.
Thank you so much, Adam. 2 questions. One, I think going back to Bethany, will the combined max preps RPI? I know there's some discussion about it. Can you just give a little update, either Bethany or Brad?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Brad. It's certainly our intent that those rankings be published as often as possible. We want them to be as transparent as possible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're working on a new system for how to display that. So at a minimum, those will be posted periodically throughout the season until we can come up with a system that displays them on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And then a question regarding softball, back to you, Adam. Please repeat number of games.
3A is 17, 4A and 5A is 19 to be postseason eligible.
Adam, is that something that can be put to an appeal if there's an extenuating circumstance?
Yeah, when we do that now, if there's something that just, something crazy happens and whatever, the fall has got some weird weather, et cetera, we can look at that on a case-by-case basis.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
What about the freshman that wins regional wrestling? So now we're back to wrestling.
Then he wouldn't have any returning state points, so he'd be placed behind those that have returning state points, but he would be the second group on the board as a regional champion.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions just for the common good before we close out here? Okay, I just want to say thank you all for participating today and for the dialogue on those earlier proposals. Again, huge thank you to CADA for all of their work, and we look forward to seeing them at the end of the month. And Legislative Council again is April 21st. It's at the Hyatt over in Aurora, right across from Children's Hospital, beginning at 9. So we look forward to everybody for the Legislative Council meeting. Rhonda, did you have anything to end, or Matt Heckel from CADA?
I just want to thank the committee chairs, committee members. As Bethany said, their hard work comes to us. They spend hours debating and working on the best possible opportunities for our kids. And I think we always have to be mindful and respectful of the work that our elected members do. And I think sometimes when we're in these conversations, we discount that, but I just want to thank all the committee chairs, the work of the CHSAA commissioners, and those who serve on the committees and provide us with these reports. And also, even though proposals, we are supposed to discuss these proposals. We're not supposed to be all on board every single time, but we get to a good place. And I think our bottom line is our kids and our program. So thank you to those that submitted proposals, because we are supposed to have this type of dialogue. This is the operations of our association. And it's 100 years old, right? And we're still using some of them, but we're evolving. So thank you for the people that submitted the leagues that submitted proposals. But I'm done. Thank you, Jen, for your organization. Matt Heckel, Mike Jacobsma. This is an amazing meeting. Doesn't happen everywhere, so I appreciate your organization.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Have a great day. We look forward to seeing you soon and being able to reconnect with you all. Have a great end of the week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.